Hi, welcome to the Lute channel. I'm Guilherme Barroso, and in this episode we continue our quest into the El Maestro, written by Luis Milan and published in Valencia in 1536. If you missed our first episode about the introduction of the book, make sure to watch it first, following this link here on the screen. If you have watched it, stay with us to discover what Milan wrote about modes. Here we go. What comes after the introduction in El Maestro is divided by Milan into two books. According to him, the first book with easier music and the second book with harder music.
The two books are very similar. Both of them start with solo pieces and finish with songs for one voice and vihuela. In the first book we find 22 fantasias, from which 9 are fantasias de consonancias y redobles, 6 pavanas, 6 villancicos, 3 in Spanish and 3 in Portuguese, 2 romances in Spanish and 3 sonnets in Italian. In the second book we find 18 fantasias, 4 tientos, 6 villancicos, 3 in Spanish and 3 in Portuguese, 2 romances in Spanish and 3 sonnets in Italian. Alongside with the music we find general instructions like here in the beginning of the first book, here between the first and second books, and here at the very end of the publication. Milan also writes some sentences with pertinent information for each particular piece. Most of the time the information regards what is the genre of the piece, how fast the piece should be played, and the mode of the piece. But sometimes Milan will write more, like details about transposition, about performance practice, and how to position a particular fret to adapt to a specific mode.
This is one of the most significant features about El Maestro. Such detailed information written by the composer about how to perform his own pieces is very rare, especially in the 16th century. In this episode we will focus on what Milan wrote about the modes.
The term that Milan uses for the modes are tonos. Although almost every piece in El Maestro has a description about its mode, it is only at the very end of the book that Milan explains what they are. He writes that there are 8 modes, 4 tonos maestros, authentic modes, and 4 tonos discípulos, plego modes, and that there are 3 ways to recognize each mode. The first way is por el término, the range. The second way is por las cláusulas. And the third way is por la cláusula final, the last cláusula. The first way to recognize the mode is through the range of the tiple, which is the Spanish word for the highest voice. Milan writes that in polyphonic compositions it is through the range of the tiple that the mode should be identified. If you are in a tono maestro, modes 1, 3, 5 or 7, the range should be 9 notes above and 1 note below the note of the final cadence, counting 10 notes in total. Here you can see the disposition of each of the tonos maestros. In the first mode, the range would be from C to E. In the third mode, the range would be from D to F. The fifth mode would be from E to G. And the seventh mode would be from F to A. Next, Milan writes that if you are in a tono discípulo, modes 2, 4, 6 or 8, the range of the tiple should be 6 notes above and 5 notes below the note of the final cadence, counting again 10 notes in total. Here you can see the disposition of all the tonos discípulos. The second mode would be from G to B, the fourth mode would be from A to C, the sixth mode would be from B to D, and the eighth mode would be from C to E. The second way is to recognize the clausulas in the piece. Let's take a very brief moment here and define the difference between clausula and cadence. In the 16th century, a clausula is a melodic formula that is used to finish a musical phrase or a piece. And a cadence is the combination of two or more clausulas. So, the cadence is concerned with the total effect of the parts, and the clausulas are the melodic formulas present in the individual voices. If you would like to know more about this topic, I recommend watching the Early Music Sources video about cadences in the 16th and 17th centuries. Now let's go back to El Maestro. Milan uses the first mode as an example for the clausulas. The first mode will have the clausulas on De La Sol Re, A La Mi Re, De La Sol, and Ge Sol Re Ut. Milan also says that one could have a clausula in F Fa Ut, but it is optional. One exception about the first mode is that it is also common to have a clausula one step below the final note, in Se Sol Fa Ut. This general rule should be followed by all 8 modes, but in the plagal modes there is no clausula in the octave above the final note, and there is a clausula 4 notes below the final note on A La Mi Re. The third way to identify a mode is through the final clausula of the piece. Milan writes that the first and second modes have the final clausula on De La Sol Re, the third and fourth modes on E La Mi, the fifth and sixth on F Fa Ut, and the seventh and eighth on Ge Sol Re Ut. To finish his writings on modes, Milan says that you can combine a tono maestro with its respective tono discipolo, and that this is called tonos mixtos, or combined modes.
Let's take a moment here to make some observations. Milan never says anything about the different poetic functions regarding the modes. Many theorists in the 16th century combined a specific mode to a specific effect, like happiness or sadness. Milan does not mention any of that. Milan provides us with very detailed information on how to identify the modes, giving us 3 different ways of recognizing them. But since almost every piece in El Maestro is already identified with its mode by Milan, why does he do that? We can only assume that for Milan it was important that the player knows what he's doing, that he's able to recognize the mode in a piece. Here we see again the didactical purpose of El Maestro. About the cadences in the piece, Milan takes the time to write each specific note that the tiple will have in the different cadences. Let's see it in more detail.
If we look closely, a clausula in De La Sol Re is not the same as a clausula in De La Sol. De La Sol Re is here and De La Sol is here. That's why you're not going to find a final cadence where the final clausula of the tiple will be in that D, only in this D, because the final clausula of the tiple is in De La Sol Re and not in De La Sol, and the same applies to the other modes. But if you are not familiarized with the gamut, you won't understand what Milan is saying. Remember what Milan said in the introduction of El Maestro to go learn canto de órgano?
So, although the vast majority of pieces in El Maestro are fantasias, an instrumental free form, Milan's conception of his pieces follows a vocal polyphonic structure, even though the polyphony is sometimes quite difficult to grasp due to the instrumental freedom of his pieces. The pieces written in tonos mixtos represent the majority of the instrumental pieces in El Maestro. This is very interesting because the fact that if a piece is only in the first mode or in the first and the second modes could be easily overlooked in an instrumental piece. Nevertheless, Milan insists on classifying every piece if it is in just one mode or combined modes, and that classification comes from the range and cadences of the highest voice. Let's analyze a piece.
Here we see the tablature of the 11th Fantasia from the first book. This Fantasia is part of the Fantasia de Consonancias y Redobles section. The characteristics of the different fantasias and tientos in El Maestro will be discussed in another episode. For now, let's just focus on the mode. Milan writes that this Fantasia is written in the first and second modes, so it is a piece with tono mixto. Let's start with the easiest task, the final clausula. If we assume that our vihuela is tuned in a nominal A, our final clausula is in de la sol re, which is consistent with the first and second modes.
Now, let's see the range of the highest voice. In tablatures, it can be quite complicated, if not impossible, to identify with 100% certainty the different voices in a polyphonic composition. We'll have a special episode on the channel just to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of the tablature. For now, let's just leave it here and focus on our piece.
The highest note is easy to find, because it is going to be the highest note of the piece, which is this D here. Now, to find the lowest note of the highest voice is not as easy. According to the improvisational characteristics of this piece and the unclear voice leading which is common to the tablature, it is practically impossible to define exactly which is the lowest note of the highest voice. My strategy was to find a moment where we had clearly a 4-part chord and see in that chord what was the lowest note on the highest voice, which was a C sharp here. So, the range of the highest voice would be from C sharp to D, which is kind of the middle section of the combined ranges of the first and second modes.
Now we come to the cadences throughout the piece. Again, because of the improvisational characteristics of this piece and the constant changes in texture with voices appearing and disappearing and the uncertainty of the voice leading, there are moments that it feels like we have a cadence, although not every note that defines that particular cadence is being played.
This happened in bar 11 and again in bar 15, which could be considered as a mi cadence in A, and again in bar 26 and bar 30, which could be considered another mi cadence now in D. If we look carefully, the section between bar 1 and bar 15 is exactly repeated from bar 16 to bar 30. The first time in D and the second time in G are 4th higher. This repetition technique is used very frequently by Milan, where the same section is repeated in another interval.
Moving on, the next cadences are clear. In bars 42 and 49, the tiple has the clausula in a la mi re, and in bar 64 in de la sol. But in bar 78, the tiple's clausula in a la mi re is in the alto voice, and in bars 90, 106 and 121,
the tiples clausulas in De La Sol Ré are in the tenor voice. Here we could see a conflict between what Milan wrote and what Milan did regarding the placement of the tiples clausulas in a different voice than the highest voice. But I won't go any further here. If you'd like to go deeper into the rabbit hole, leave a comment on this video or send me an email, and we can discuss it further. Here we can see a prolongation of the piece in the last 2 bars after the final cadence, a common occurrence in 16th century music. Be careful that Milan's term for these consonances that come after the final cadence is cadencia, and it has nothing to do with what we call now cadence, so watch out.
With this brief analysis, we finish our episode about the modes in El Maestro. If you would like to hear this fantasia, the link will be here in the description of this video. Don't forget to give the thumbs up and to subscribe in the channel, so you don't miss more episodes on the El Maestro and other subjects about the lute world. Stay tuned.